consistent, competent communication that answers people's questions, the ones that are real that they have, like, why do we have to do this? How am I going to pay for it? Do I have options to make payments for it? All of these kind of questions, anticipate those. How would you feel if you were blindsided by a special assessment, if you were not in the know as a board member? And then address those. The people in your community know truth, and they feel truth when they see it and when they hear it. And there is no way you can go wrong purporting the truth or putting it out there.
HOA Insights, common sense for common areas, exists to help all 2 million volunteer board members nationwide have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions for their future. This podcast is sponsored by 4 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services. You'll find links to their websites and social media in the show notes.
Hi, I'm Robert Nordland of Association Reserves.
And I'm Julie Adaman of Adaman Inc. And we're here with HOA Insights to promote common sense
for common areas. Well, welcome to episode number 42, where we'll be talking about community and communication. When we talk about communication, I think about the quote from famous playwright George Bernard Shaw, who said the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So for something complicated to start with, yes, and you add volunteers who are not necessarily communicators, volunteer board members, and add skeptical or unhappy listeners, and you've got a recipe for a problem. Well, this is a follow-up to an episode number 41, a fascinating conversation I had with attorney George Nowak. That was supposed to be just a 5-minute answer, but George's depth of experience is so deep that it was a rich conversation that turned into a full episode. So if you didn't catch that episode or any other prior episodes, take a moment after today's program to listen from our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or watch on our YouTube channel. And remember to subscribe to this podcast on any of the more popular podcast platforms so you don't miss any future episodes. We do enjoy hearing from you, so if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or a question you'd like to have us address, you can contact us at 805-203-3130 or email us at podcast@reservestudy.com. So, Julie, to start today's program, let's start with one of those listener questions. This one from Ron from Silver Spring, Maryland. We talk about business at the monthly meetings, and that business is recorded in the meeting minutes, but it seems like nobody in the association knows what's going on. Aren't we doing the right things?
Well, I would have to say, yeah, you're doing one of the right things. And especially if you're doing your minutes correctly, that means there's not a lot of discussion in the minutes and that it's basically motions approved. But people don't get a lot of information about that. And I think sometimes boards, they're so steeped in the information of what's going on in the community and what's coming up, what's been passed, that they forget that most people are barely paying attention, if at all, to what's going on in the community or basically any type of information that's coming out, especially if you're just posting minutes or something. And they only pay attention when it directly affects them. For example, when the dues go up by 20%, or just as an easy one to pick, but it could be also, we're going to slurry the streets on Tuesday and nobody knows it because they didn't read it. They didn't see it in the minutes. So yeah, you're probably doing part of the right things, but I think the big thing to understand, and Robert, you and I have talked about this previously, is that when you are on a board, and unfortunately, and many people aren't comfortable with this, but when you're on a board, you are in marketing, folks. I mean, whether you like it or not, you are. So a couple of things you always have to remember is that it takes about 7 times in front of someone before they see it. I mean, that's kind of one of the first rules of marketing. So if you were whatever, just a business, and you had an advertisement, if that advertisement went out in a flyer that hit people's house 7 times, it could be just once a month, so that could be 7 months, then they just see the ad. It doesn't mean they really absorb it. So if you take that and extrapolate that out to the HOA world, that means that a board that's just sending out minutes or posting minutes somewhere, and it comes out once a month, it's 7 months before someone recognizes those are even posted. And by that time, they're months and months behind about what's going on.
Right.
So this communication process has to be several prongs, and they have to be consistent and well done.
You know, you got me thinking that we're trying to promote, well, obviously common sense for common areas. We're trying to promote well-functioning communities. And I was just thinking, if you do have a well-functioning community, then perhaps the homeowners can relax and they say everything's under control. Why should I read the meeting minutes? So how do you balance that between not creating a stir, not creating news where there is no news, but how do you make it interesting enough or keep it interesting enough so that the homeowners are encouraged or interested or have a reason to look at the meeting minutes?
Well, I'm going to say that's kind of a chicken and egg thing. I think everybody, the communities are more relaxed, more calm when they know things are being well handled. And usually they get that well handled, you're in good hands feeling because they feel the board is being open and communicative. It's when owners feel that the board is being secret, whether the board is or not. We're talking perception is reality. Okay, when they feel like there's something secret going on behind those closed doors and we just don't know, that's when communities start to fall apart, meaning the chi of the communities start to fall apart then. So I believe, and I know it works because I've been involved in many that have done this and turned themselves around as far as the feeling in the community goes, and the owners being for the board instead of having that adversarial relationship with the board. And it all comes down to the amount of communication. Let's take an example, if you don't mind. So let's just say that there's going to have to be because this is such a common thing, there's going to have to be a special assessment to re-roof the clubhouse, right? They just don't have it. Now, boards that just sends the community a single notice saying, oh, by the way, 20% special assessment coming up, in 3 months or in a month, get used to it. I mean, that's kind of the attitude, are the ones that are going to create the torch and pitchfork crowd coming to the next meeting with their, fire sticks and all that kind of thing. But boards that know this is coming down the pike, and typically boards know this is coming down the pike. It's not like something that just sprung on them. Right. But let's say you have a 3-month lead time. That means, what would I do if that was me to give everyone informed? I would send out blast email, very well written. We could talk about that in a little bit. I would send a blast email out to all the owners. I would do something also by snail mail. I would hold a town hall or two. Yes, I know everyone grits their teeth when they hear that. But that openness and having someone there to talk to. So if you had a town hall about a roof that's going to be replaced, who would I have there? I'd have the board of directors there. I would also have the either the roofing contractor or a roof consultant. So let's just say they had hired a roof consultant to go up and look at the roofs and say, oh, yes, we need to do this. I would have the roof consultant there. And then I would also have, if necessary, association counsel there to discuss the legalities, because a lot of people think, oh, my God, you can't special assess us X amount or whatever it is. And when counsel is there to reassure, that means the board is open to talking to the owners. They've brought in the appropriate experts for this particular problem. We have a roofing expert, and we have association counsel to talk about the legalities of being able to special assess this amount and how common this is. When you take this approach, this multi-pronged approach to communication, people have a tendency to absorb it, and they're like, okay, the board is being open. We were there. We could ask questions. They notified us in writing via email, and then we also got the notice in the regular mail, and now they're holding a town hall. And oh, yes, they're holding another town hall in another 2 weeks for the people who couldn't make the first one. So I know this is a lot of work. Boards, I know, believe me, I know. But it will make your life easier in the long run, and your community will function better.
Yeah. Julie, I want to bring you back to what you said at the beginning. You're in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a board member, they came in thinking maybe, like I did, that I was serving my community. It was a need that needed to be filled. Maybe there's board members listening here who came in because they had a passion for a pet project. But I am with you so much. You're in marketing. You're on a board. It's a committee. You're working for the association. So it is a community-wide thing, and you've got to reach out to the community. But when you were talking about it, I started writing notes. you used the word multi-pronged. You said emails, snail mail, town hall, and then I was at a board meeting last week, walking through the lobby. There was a box full of baked goods and donuts right next to it with notes, like things you need to know. Next week here at our association blank. And so the food got everyone's eyes, and whether people took the food or not, I went over there to see what they were talking about. And they had a notice in the lobby.
Yeah.
And also in this day and age, I wonder if the board could do a quick Zoom meeting, record it, and then have a link so people can listen to it at their convenience. Maybe summarize it down to this needs to happen at this point in time. The paving of the east parking lots, we're going to close that parking lot off. Everyone for 1 week will need to park in the west parking lot, things like that. Just quickly explain it. And so helping people feel that this is our community. And then hopefully, crossing my fingers here, the owners say, thank goodness for our board who is handling things. Thank goodness for our board who is telling us what's going on.
Absolutely. It depends, it's whatever your community is. I think that's the thing about the donuts. It's a great, especially for a high-rise situation where everyone has to go through the lobby. That works really well. And I would say to people, don't be afraid to get creative about it. But my next advice would be, this shouldn't be just a one-time thing when some big thing is going to happen in the community. There should be regular, consistent communication going out to the members, to the owners, every month at a minimum. I mean, and sometimes twice a month. I mean, with technology, you can e-blast things out that people need to hear. But I would say you're always going to have some sort of a newsletter, or you're going to send email with a link to the newsletter page on the website, or whatever it is. Just depends on what your community can do or what type of community it is. I know people don't like to write necessarily for the newsletter, and also maybe they're not the most outgoing person and certainly don't want to be on a Zoom or talk to a whole group of people, but it will fall to you to do at least some of this. Like if you don't like to talk to everyone, if you're shy and you have another board member who's a little more gregarious and they don't mind talking to everyone, maybe this board member doesn't like to talk, maybe you do the writing for the newsletter, summarizing what has happened. The minutes are really good, and most states you have to post them or send them out or make them available somewhere along the line. But that only gives a little snapshot. But when you want to add context to what has to go on, which I really advise that you do, add context to what is going on, then you're going to have to step up and give that information to the owners just the way you would like to receive it. And that was one other thing I want to talk about, is that when you are going to send something out in writing, in newsletter, e-blast, whatever it is like that, or even if you're going to speak in front of people at a town hall, what you want to do is before you sit down to type at your keyboard about it, or before you go to that town hall, you need to put yourself in the recipient's shoes. So if you were the owner and you're not on the board and you're like, okay, I'm coming to this town hall and I don't know what's going to happen, but I hear they're going to special assess us. Think to yourself, how would I feel if I was in their shoes? I mean, this is something brand new. I've never heard about it before. And so what kind of information would I want if I was, if I was being confronted with, especially something that's going to cost me money? What do I want to hear? And if you put yourself in their shoes, then you'll be able to at least give yourself somewhat of an outline of what you're going to talk to owners about, even in a live situation or in a newsletter situation. And what you always want to do is give them some context. You want to let them know what experts you've talked to, whether it's legal or roof contractor, whatever it is that appropriate to this situation. How many bids the board got. People always want to know, are you taking the best bid? How many bids you got, and the communication that went out. And everyone will have a tendency they may not like it, but they'll have a tendency to calm down and feel like they're in good hands because the board touched all those places that I had concerns about, and they answered them fairly well. And they tried to communicate that more than one way: town hall, newsletter, e-blast, whatever it is. So that's an empathy thing. Put yourself in the recipient's shoes, and you really can't go wrong. And that'll also give you a guide for what to write about or what to speak about.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I was chatting with one of our other regular co-hosts, Kevin Davis. He was talking about a webinar he was doing, and he was just telling me about what the topic was, and he was bouncing the idea off his wife, and his wife said, "No, that's too boring." And just very simply get that feedback, and that pushed him a different direction that made it a whole lot better. As a board member, you probably know too much, and you've got to bounce that off. You've got to bounce your talking points off a spouse, a friend, parents, your kids, just to say, okay, have I simplified my message? Have I directed my message? What do you want to know? And they'll poke and find out the whys that you haven't clarified, and you can get that message a whole lot clearer. It's fascinating how, well, at Association Reserves, we talk about to our project managers, you've got to get on the other side of the desk because you know too much about this reserve study that you're preparing. What does the client need to hear?
Yeah.
Get on the other side of the desk. Get around your desk, sit in the guest chair, and think about what you've just written. That whole idea of perspective. You're the communicator, and you've got the recipient. The recipient's busy, and why would they care? And part of it is, like you said, the repetition, like why we see the same ads on TV all the time, because repetition works. And getting that consistent message across and doing it in a way that you've basically trained your homeowners that maybe you have what you need to know this month. Maybe it affects it, maybe it doesn't. We're going to trim the trees second week in blank, or the grocery store is having a sale on something. Whatever it is that can affect your neighbors, train them that something is useful, something is helpful. Is that what you're talking about with the repetition?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, as you know, and maybe some of the viewers know, I recently moved to a ginormous homeowners association north of Tucson, Arizona, and there's 5,000 units here, and there's two associations. But it's interesting because there is so much communication that comes out. I live in HOA 1, and you get email message. I mean, I must get something daily. But, and of course, we have golf courses and restaurants and all this stuff. So there's a lot going on, tons of clubs. But I probably get something once a day from HOA 1 via email. They send out their own HOA 1 it's actually a newspaper, believe it, because the place is big, right?
Okay.
And then HOA 2, I don't know what they do as far as the personal communication, but HOA 1 and 2 come together and put out a really big newspaper once a month. So all
for the overall.
The overall, because we're all on a reciprocal. Everything's reciprocal. So, but they come together and put that. I mean, there is so much information that comes out that you couldn't say, oh, I didn't know about that, because if you didn't read anything. I mean, or you just chose not to pay that much attention to it. And of course, if you go on nextdoor.com, like all you board members know what that is, of course you do. At nextdoor.com, you're thinking there's a lot of uninformed people for a place that sends out a lot of communication. But you're always going to have that to some degree, so don't feel like the Lone Ranger. But consistent, competent communication that answers people's questions, the ones that are real that they have, like, why do we have to do this? How am I going to pay for this? Do I have special assessments, what I'm talking about? How am I going to pay for it? Do I have options to make payments for it? All of these kind of questions, anticipate those. How would you feel if you were blindsided by a special assessment, if you were not in the know as a board member? And then address those as calmly and as professionally as possible. And if you've done your work appropriately, meaning you've gotten the right expert input, you've gotten the right amount of bids, et cetera, people know truth when they see it. They really do. There's always a couple psychos who may not, but overall, the people in your community know truth, and they feel truth when they see it and when they hear it. And there is no way you can go wrong purporting the truth or putting it out there.
Fantastic. Well, let's take a quick break at this point in time for a message from our sponsor. I want to come right back and follow up on a couple of things of what you just said, but at this point in time, we'll take a quick break.
Numbers matter, and we need numbers like game scores and bank balances to let us know where we stand. The same is true for your association. Is yours thriving or struggling? Let me introduce you to the FIFO Health Score, like your own personal FICO credit score. Now in one simple number, owners and boards can learn the combined financial, physical, and operational health of their association. The good news, it's free at ourfifo.com. That's our, FIPHO.com. Learn how your association measures up.
And we're back. Julie, you were speaking about the communication. I wrote down consistent, competent, And in my brain, I'm also thinking concise, because if you've got, as you said, a newsletter or a magazine, newspaper that's coming out on a daily basis, for a busy person, that's what we call here TLDR, too long didn't read. Talk to me about concise and brevity.
Yes. So if you are in the age group that Robert and I are in, we prefer to call ourselves classic, not old. We're classic, right?
Seasoned.
But you're more used to reading things that are longer. But the truth is that in today's world, people are so busy, or they simply do not have the attention span to read something really long. So if you are trying to get a lot of information out in a short spot, I would tell you to use bullet points. Here's what's happening on this date. Slurry seal. What's going to be closed? X. The who, what, when, where, how. Bullet points and let it ride. Any questions? And then ask our manager, assuming you have one at the moment, and then just a full click through. They can click through and ask. Or look at the website and put a click through on there. People don't read stuff like that. If you can't say it in, I don't know, 500 words, 600 words, people are just their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to move on to something different.
Or now you may have, I would even say one paragraph, one small paragraph.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like, you've got to. And
if you
tell
can,
them what it is. And if for more information, you can go here. But you've got to tell them parking lot's going to be closed on the west side on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, weather permitting. Yep.
Yes. And again, if you have to send out a quick e-blast reminding people, bullet points, 6 or 7 that they can just absorb, and that's it. And no one can accuse the board of not telling anyone. Like, well, we did email. It's on the website. We pushed you to the website through an e-blast. I mean, you've done all that, and maybe they still didn't see it, but you did your best.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, You also said a couple of psychos. That's real. I was at
it is.
We did how do we deal with that? Let's go down, hopefully, a brief path. I had a board meeting yesterday, online board meeting, where it was being derailed by one person that was disruptive, contrarian to everything everyone else was saying. And the whole thing was, people appreciated that this person was a known contrarian. And they let this person have their say. They were kind, they were respectful. But in my opinion, it seems like there is a fraction of people out there, a percentage of people out there that maybe should not be in community associations. That they don't function well, they don't play well with others. I've got to be real careful here because we have homeowners here listening to this podcast in addition to board members. But for the board members out there, I think we need to appreciate that there is, in my guess, 3 to 5%.
3%. I'd say 3. Yeah.
3 of homeowners that are just going to be a difficult
thorn. They're going to be a thorn always. Yeah.
But don't run your association for the 3%. Run your association for the 97%. Is that fair?
Absolutely, that's fair. You have to.
Okay.
Let me ask you, the person that you were talking about, were they a board member?
No.
Okay, so they're a homeowner and it's a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, right? A lot of people, board members, managers now, they kind of like those Zoom meetings because when you have that contrarian and they've had their say, then you can put the mute button on. And then you can control that. Live meetings, you can't do that so much. But there are some ways to handle people that are being a big pain and very disruptive at a meeting. So at a live meeting. But and Robert, you're absolutely right. Oh, go ahead.
Let's do that in a future meeting. A future podcast.
Yeah, no, I got it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They have to run it for the 97%, not the 3.
Right. Yeah. This person in this case was saying that you're always spending my money. You're always raising the homeowner assessments. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what the board's supposed to do. They're supposed to spend your money to take care of the property, and they've got to be raising the assessments to keep up with inflation. Have you not heard?
Yeah. Have you been to the grocery store lately?
That's it. Yeah. So we've talked about communication. We've talked about multi-pronged email, snail mail, website, town hall, lobby, recorded message. Be creative, however you can do it. It's got to be enough information, but concise, short enough that they read it. Talk about who from, pros and cons of from the manager and the management company or from the board. Who has the message?
Well, I think the board overall has the message, but it really would depend on the association, the community, the board, and the management company if they have a management company. Or I think large-scale on-site places typically have a manager who could handle that. If you are being managed professionally by a portfolio manager, I mean, you have that manager, but that manager also manages 5, 6, 7, 8 other properties, I think that's a little difficult. And I think that the gist of all of that communication should be board generated. Obviously, the manager has to be brought in because they need to know what you're going to say and what's going on, and maybe they have some input.
Don't say that.
Yeah. Why did you do that?
You don't have the legal authority to say that.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Do that.
But I do think a lot of that's the board responsibility, again, especially in the portfolio situation, or if you are self-managed, meaning you are the board managing, you have no one else to go to, managing the community. And in a portfolio situation, typically the management company will charge extra for the manager to write the newsletter. And I don't know that that's that big a deal, but I like to see the information come from the heartbeat. And you guys are the heartbeat as the board.
Yeah.
That's just what I like to see.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. The working title for this podcast episode is Community and Communication. And I think we want to promote community. It's ABC Homeowners Association. It's our community. We're the board. If you push it off to the management company, you are, I believe, working against yourself because you're making yourself sound like an apartment that's being managed by some outside entity, and you lose the heartbeat. And I love that idea of heartbeat. Julie, as always, it's great talking with you. I love, it's a fascinating conversation. Any closing thoughts to add at this time?
Well, I want to tell all you board members out there, and it's some of you who've been listening to this podcast with me on it, know that I recently, before I moved down here, I sat on 2 boards at once. So I was crazy. But, it's tremendously rewarding when you see the housing prices of the community that you are in. The housing prices either, go up, and you see that the community is well run and the lawns are mowed, or in my case, the rocks are mowed where we are out in the desert. But wherever you see it, I look at the community I live in, and it's obviously very well run. But when I was on the boards, the communities were well run. And I got to tell you, people, they don't appreciate how hard you work to make that happen. So give yourself a pat on the back and understand that if your community is not getting too many complaints, the place looks fabulous, and prices are steady or up, you're doing a really, really good job. And I want to thank you for it, because not many other people will. And don't run off the board. Go ahead and stay on there for a while longer.
Fantastic. Well, Julie, thank you very much. We are here to encourage and equip our board member audience. We hope you learn some more HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense to your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comment section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com, or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that support this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.